I'm just looking at the panels that you've got coming up, right? Director of Platform Execution and Director of Application Engineering. So from your perspective, which one of those people, like if you look at these two problems that they're mainly trying to solve or solve for at the moment, which one of these people would be most associated with which problem?
I think for the adjudication platform, that
Mhm.
will probably be the director of platform execution. And
Yeah.
then for the data pipeline platform, that'll definitely be the director of application engineering.
Yep. Okay. 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 So just confirming adjudication, Director of Platform Execution. And then the data pipeline would be application engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, talk to me about data pipelining. So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, looking at your background, I know that you've done this in a number of different places. But if you were to, like, if I were to say, hey, what kind of experience do you have building some kind of data platform? Where have you done it, and what's the context in which you've done it?
Yeah, I think probably the thing that would be most relevant for them would be the data platform that I was building over at Prescriptive. But the only thing is that that data platform was a work in progress when I left. It had actually never completed. But the reason why it was relevant to them is because we took all the data that we are collecting from claims, prescriptions that were coming in, adjudication, as well as our own as well as our own clinical services,
Yep.
and on top of that, our customer success services. And we were taking that data and building data pipelines on top of it that would be able to fulfill all the specific data needs for all of those separate pieces of the business, as well as being able to provide comprehensive reporting that was customizable and configurable for our partners so that they can go in and they can say, we want a report of, how many prescriptions we filled last month. What was the price of those prescriptions? What was the average price? What types of prescriptions were they? So that was where I was doing it there. And then when I built data pipelines at Sure, we built data warehouses and data stores for each specific partner that we had for every single product. So we were able to build data pipelines that not only were responsive to the partner demands, so what they wanted to see, how their insurance programs were running, but also that were fully traceable and auditable by insurance regulators as well. So if they wanted to say, hey, John Doe got this insurance quote for his 2025 Prius and he said it was too high, how did you guys price him? We were able to actually quickly bring up that data and pull it and send it directly to the insurance regulators so they can do their audit. They can do their audit process.
Okay. So, and I guess from like an architecture perspective, why was these thing at Shaw, sorry, why was the thing at Prescriptive more relevant for these guys than what you did at Shaw?
Because what was happening at Prescriptive, the types of data that we were collecting and the purposes for that data was exactly what Smith RX is trying to do.
Right.
So what we did at Sure, the only thing that was really relevant, the data that was really relevant was the health and the performance of the actual insurance products. So how many insurance policies were being bought? What was the average quote price? What was the average bind policy price? How often were they renewing? Kind of more just financial metrics, as well as just keeping an entire data store of all the policies that were bound and how they were bound and who they were bound for. Whereas at Prescriptive, we were taking clinical data, we were taking individual data, we were taking adjudication data, and we were taking customer service data, and we were funneling that to the correct places so that those centers of the business or those business verticals would be able to see the data that was relevant to them. So there was a lot more stakeholders for that data compared to the stakeholders for the data within Sure. The big difference being, though, is that we never completed the prescriptive data platform, but we did complete the Sure data platform.
Gotcha. Okay. And so if you were to explain it in technical terms to me, the difference, right?
Yeah.
How would you explain that?
Yeah, so the big difference between Sure and Prescriptive's data platforms was Sure's data platform was all held within JSON format.
Mhm.
And then when we wanted to run reporting, we would just pull the reporting manually in any format somebody would need it because the stakeholders were completely different.
Mhm.
Whereas the platform that we were building at Prescriptive was something that can be accessed by anybody and would also would be feeding the information to the relevant architecture pieces of technology. So not only was it something that like you can use SQL to run any query you wanted, but it was also something that was plugging directly into our adjudication APIs, our member platform or our partner platform that we were building out,
Yep.
as well as all the other, um, essentially all the other APIs we were building out.
Gotcha.
So
Cool.
it was a much more sophisticated platform than what we built over at Sure.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you know why I'm asking all of these questions, right?
Yeah, because they're going to ask me
Yeah.
that.
Cool. So honestly, man, I feel like from a technical perspective, you're pretty spot on. Like it doesn't seem like there's much
Cool.
need to focus on in that area. You communicated quite well. There's always going to be those random like curveball technical questions that they might throw out there, like, hey, like how do you
Oh
do
yeah.
query or like how do you do this? And you can spend too much time preparing sometimes, and so I'm not a big fan of that. And so
Yeah. Oh
unless
God, yeah.
you feel like there's any particular gap in terms of your technical understanding, then I would probably advise not to worry too much about prepping for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you do get a technical question that you listen to it and you go, you know what, I'm not 100% sure, you can just be completely honest, right? So
Yeah.
one of the worst things you can do is somebody gives you a technical question, you go, I think it's XYZ, and then you fuck it up, and then
Totally. Yeah.
and you know, it's much better to just say, hey, I'm just thinking it through. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. And then you can say, look, to be completely transparent, this is the area of technology that I worked in. This is what I did at this company. This is what I did at this company. It is something that I'd be more than comfortable doing, right?
Cool.
Obviously, it's my background. I just don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm way more comfortable with that because when I try to bullshit, I ramble and then it goes on forever and then everything I said makes absolutely no sense and I know it doesn't make any sense and then it just puts me in like the worst mind state because I can't stop thinking about like fuck, I just fucked up that question.
Yeah, don't stress.
Yeah,
There's like one technical question you don't know, just be honest about it, right? And if
yeah,
you're inquiring about a particular area of technology that you haven't worked in, just be like, hey, I want to be transparent. I haven't worked much in this area. Here's what I have done that's adjacent to that. And so I have a
mm,
functional understanding of how it works. But if you were to keep asking me how to do all these little bits and pieces, the answer to all those questions would be, I don't know.
yeah.
I'm very confident it wouldn't take me very long to pick it up, but just want to be transparent with you.
Yeah. Could I also just say, like, if it, because sometimes this happens too. Sometimes they'll ask me about something and I'm like, I know I did that. I just literally can't remember
Yeah.
because it was so long ago, or like it's just been so long that I've done it. Where can I just be transparent, be like, look, I know I've done that before, but it's just been, with the exam, some things from Sure, they were like 5, 6 years ago. I'm like, I just can't remember exactly how we did that. Is that an acceptable answer?
Yeah,
Cool.
100%. So,
Nice.
I mean, it is worth it to take the time to go through like all the projects you've worked on and look at all the details.
Yeah.
If there's like one or two like tiny technical details that you just don't necessarily remember, it's okay to be transparent about that.
Nice.
Um, if you're feeling confident in delivering this, what you can say is, look, I'll be transparent. It was around about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know that specific technical detail off the top of my head.
Yeah.
What I can tell you about that project is we did this, this, and this, and I'm
Mm,
very confident that we could be able to do that. I'd be able to do that for you as well.
nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Because ultimately, you have to demonstrate enough technical knowledge that they feel comfortable letting you direct technical resources. but you don't
Yeah.
want to be the guy on the tools, right? They're not hiring you for that, right?
Yeah.
It's nice if you can go in there and be like, hey, I can spot a problem and see what's happening and workshop with an engineer. That's a big asset. But you don't need to know every little technical detail. Like
Yeah.
that's why you have technical people, right?
Yeah. And you also learn over time too. Like,
Yeah.
every tech stack is different. What people are using is always kind of crazy. Like the at Prescriptive, we use GraphQL. Like I had never used GraphQL before. I had no experience with GraphQL. But then after a while, I understood what GraphQL was and what it did and why we used it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's also just like one of those things where, you know, there's some things that like you just don't know, but you can pick them up. You can figure it out after a period of time.
100%. 100%. Cool. So let's talk about I guess like the technical structure of the adjudication.
Yeah, definitely. So, for which one? For sure or for prescriptive?
So let's do both.
Okay, cool. So, Prescriptive's adjudication platform was mostly a third-party platform. So, the way that it worked is we got prescriptions from the switch. We extracted all that data from the prescription. So, you're talking about patient's name, what the prescription was, the dosage, the package, kind of all those little details. And then you ran it through the adjudication platform. Then, based on the responses from the adjudication platform, you were able to take the prescription information and the patient information. So, how much money they had left in their out of pocket, what that amount was, and mirror and essentially merge that data together to give them a transparent overview of what the prices per prescription were for all the pharmacies that they wanted to see. So usually it was within a 5-10 mile radius of their address. So they can be able to see, okay, if I send my prescription to this
Mhm.
CVS pharmacy down the street, it's only going to cost me 250 instead
Mhm.
of sending it to Walgreens where it's going to cost me 350. So once they select that pharmacy, then at that point, then we would route the prescription to the pharmacy. Then the pharmacy would actually fill the prescription. And at that point, the prescription would actually get adjudicated. So that at that point, we would know, okay, well, this person just spent 250 on this medication. It's going to cost us as a PBM this much. Here's how much money we need to route
Mhm.
to the pharmacy, and here's how much money is going to have to get paid out by us. And that was done on a per plan level. So we had a couple of different plans,
Okay.
and they were all using clinical information that our ClinOps team had put together for the specific types of plans.
Perfect.
The adjudication system that we had built for sure was a little bit different
So,
because it wasn't. Yeah,
so that's the functional aspect of it, right? What
yeah,
the technical aspect of it, right? So,
yeah.
what are the pieces of technology? How does it all connect together?
Very good point. Yeah, so the adjudication engine would actually adjudicate the actual prescription, and then
Mhm.
all that data would flow in through a GraphQL layer. Then the GraphQL layer would have the responses ready for either our own internal MyPrescriptive platform or the third-party platforms that our technology was embedded in. So that GraphQL layer was essentially the translation layer of all the data that we were getting back from the adjudication platform that were able to surface the specific prices.
Mhm. Great. Fantastic. Okay. And
Cool.
then how is that different from Sure functionally and then technically?
Yeah, so functionally it was different from Sure because the way that the adjudication platform was built for Sure, it was built on a product by product basis. So the adjudication platform at Prescriptive was only for prescription medication. The adjudication platform that we built at Prescriptive was for auto insurance, credit card benefits, homeowners insurance, essentially all the different types of insurance products that we were able to support. And that entire system was completely configurable based on the specific product that you were adjudicating for. And what we did is we took all the data points and the kind of essentially the adjudication algorithm that the TPAs were using for those products and then digitized it so that when somebody was going through and submitting a claim, we had to ask them a bunch of questions up front. So there is very much a user experience layer on top of that. You know, when did the claim occur? What was the claim for? What was the damage? What happened? Upload some pictures. Then we took all of that data and we were able to process it. And based on the responses that the member gave us, then we're able to make an adjudication decision of whether the claim should be approved or it should be denied or it needs to get sent to somebody else for further verification. From a technology standpoint, the way that it was very different is that we had one single API that was essentially our adjudication API. And that adjudication API would be able to be configurable based on product and based by partner and based on the ways the TPA wanted the claim to be adjudicated. So then what that API did is actually connected. There was no GraphQL layer. What we did is we actually just surfaced all of that information in JSON format so
Mhm.
that it can be integrated into either our own front-end experience, which we built end-to-end experiences, or directly into an embedded partner experience. And that's how they were able to see essentially the status of their claim.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, I think all your answers were fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, great, great answers. I like the fact that you explained it functionally first, right? Before you
Cool.
go to the technical details. So even when you're speaking with even when you're speaking with somebody who's like a technical resource or somebody who understands the tech, it's always better to explain the functionality first before you
Okay.
move on the technical detail, because then the technical detail makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and if somebody asks you, hey, can you explain technically how this is structured? You could say, okay, sure. Happy to do that. Before I do, let me just kind of explain functionally how it works, and then I'll explain the technology, and then I'll probably give you a bit more insight into how it's all layered together. And so if you can answer a question like that and then break it down, it's going to come across a lot more, you'll come across a lot more knowledgeable, because a lot of people can do one or the other. Not a lot of people can do
Mm,
at the same time in a seamless way.
mm,
And,
nice.
and
Oh, that's really good to know.
yeah. So, and as as a GPM or as a director of product, if you're able to do that, then you're saying that not only are you able to communicate on a technical level, but you're also able to functionally communicate like the business reason why things needed to connect together in that specific way, right?
Nice.
Then you layer that in with the ability to communicate on strategy and manage a team, and they're like, this guy's a director. Like, there's no way we could hire him as a GPM. That'd be stupid. Um,
Cool.
so cool, man. So I think with all of what we did there, I think we've covered PBM understanding and technical
Cool.
understanding, right? In terms of the structure. Now you may get asked about other things that you have built. And so
Mm,
there's a couple of, we went over the framework last time of like the context, action, results. Um,
hmm
and so I still would like you to keep that front and center. So
Sure.
the um, I guess how you synthesize it with what we were just talking about is you just need to bear in mind and think about the question that somebody's asking you specifically, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's asking you about a very like, hey, can you explain to me like um, what experience you have with building a data platform, right? You could
hmm
the car response with all of the details that we spoke about, right? So why was it a problem and why did it need to be built? First, explain functionally how you built it, right? And the actions you went, and then obviously what the result was after that.
Nice.
Right? You can weave in details like, hey, I think this is probably the most relevant compared to what it is you're trying to do at Smith RX because of XYZ. However, before I left, we hadn't quite finished building it, but this is the technical structure of it. What
Mm,
I did build something similar at Shore, which was finished, and I'm happy to go into that as well if you like. Right?
nice. Nice.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because I can even talk to even though we didn't complete the data pipeline project at Prescriptive, I still have enough technical detail of like how we were planning on doing it because we had essentially all just we had planned it all out. We were just slowly phasing it in.
Yeah.
So I can even just talk about that too.
Great. Fantastic.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk about vision and
Mm,
OKRs, right?
yeah.
So, um, this is a this is a this is an interesting one. So with this, what they want to know is essentially how much responsibility have you had in inputting into the overall like direction of the company's
Mm,
that, as well as, hey, like how have you also participated in setting OKRs and also meeting and exceeding OKRs, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, let's talk about that, right? Like, how much experience have you had
Yeah.
in,
So yeah, go for it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, I would say, like, how much experience have you had in setting, I guess, the strategic vision for companies?
So strategic vision, I've done a ton of, both at Prescriptive and at Sure, and pretty much every other place I've been at.
Mhm.
The one consistent theme with every single company I've been at, though, is OKRs have always been bullshit. They've always been something that you set at the beginning of the year, and then nobody ever pays any more attention to them anymore. So the functional use of OKRs, at least the intended use of OKRs, has always been something where essentially every organization I've been at, they're like, let's do OKRs. And then they do OKRs and then no one ever talks about them anymore. But the things that I always did is I just had very clear North Star metrics that we were tracking. And those were the things that we were working towards. So I don't know if that is an acceptable answer. I mean, obviously, I don't want to tell them like OKRs have always been bullshit everywhere, every place I've worked at.
Mhm.
Um, but if I could tell them that, instead of using OKRs in a traditional format, there was always North Star metrics that we use to track against our goals for the products and features that we were releasing.
Mhm.
So, perfect example of that is at Prescriptive. For my Prescriptive, the big thing that we really wanted to do is we wanted to drive down PMPM costs. And that's the cost that every patient pays for their prescriptions on an average monthly basis. So we're making sure that we are working towards every single feature that we were
So
releasing.
just
Yeah,
stop there for a sec. So,
sure.
why was that the North Star metric? And also, what input did you have in defining that as a metric?
The reason the reason why it was a North Star metric is because every single company that we had signed, every partnership that we had signed, we had a PMPM guarantee. So
Mhm.
we had essentially promised them at the beginning of the partnership, hey, if you come with us, your members are going to spend less money on prescriptions. And the way that we tracked that was the PMPM costs.
Mhm.
That is like kind of like a traditional metric that that all PBMs use.
Mhm.
Well, especially the ones that actually want to save money. Most of them don't. But that's why it was so important to us.
Mhm.
So I wasn't involved in selecting the metric, but I was involved in making sure that we were tracking against that metric and we were actually driving down those PMPMs.
Gotcha. So that was a prescriptive. What about at Shaw, where you were director, right? That was a
Yeah, exactly. So at Sure, when I was a director, there was a couple different metrics that we were targeting. The biggest one was time to market. We were very, very slow, at least initially, to be able to get products out to market. Sometimes it would take us 6 months to get one product available in one state, which really wasn't going to give our partners the bang for their buck. The other thing that I was tracking against was dev resources and dev time. We've had a lot of custom built products, a lot of just bespoke technology that we're building out for each and every single one of our um, partners. So we needed to move away from that and build a configurable, scalable platform instead of one where we get a new partner and we spin up a whole new instance of things. So those were kind of the two main metrics that that we were pushing against. Those were metrics that I had brought up, and those were metrics that essentially I took to the CEO and the CTO and said, look, these are the things that we need to be responsible for, and this is how we're going to track them. So then that way, every single time we were bringing down, whether it was a new product release or a new feature release, we were able to tie that directly back to those metrics and say, this is what we're trying to do, and this is how it's going to impact these specific metrics. And then once they were released, we
Mhm.
were able to go back and be able to track the success of that. Okay. What was the time to market for this product release compared to the last product release? How much engineering resources did we have to use when releasing this new partner configuration compared to another similar partner configuration?
Got it. Okay. And what was the result?
Amazing. So we were able to take down, we went from launching one auto product in one state in 6 months to releasing a entire business insurance product nationwide in a year.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And I think you told me about that product last time we spoke in a one-on-one, right? Like the what
I
that
think
was.
so. Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, that was a great example. So you can say, hey, look, happy to speak about that, what that particular product was and elaborate if you'd like to, but from an OKR perspective, that's so here's how I would frame it, right?
Yeah,
That I would just say that unfortunately, in a lot of the companies you've worked at previously, OKRs were something that were sorry, my Siri is going off for some reason.
oh, trust me, I know, man.
Uh, yeah, so you would say a lot of the companies I've worked at previously, OKRs have unfortunately been something that the executive team has spoken about at the start of the year and then they're released. And then it's kind of fallen by the wayside, right?
Yeah,
And so
totally.
unfortunately, there haven't been a large focus. And you say, however, what has been a large focus or a large, part of my philosophy or the way that I operate is, I guess, North Star metrics, right? And then you kind of
Yeah.
lead that. And then you would say, so, at Shore as an example where I was working as a director. So you always give the context around what it is you were doing,
Mm,
you're leading the projects you're working on. You'd say that I realized that one of the things that we needed to focus on was um, developer resources as well as time to market in terms of product, right? And so you're saying that you identified that as a North Star metric, right? And the reason why. And then you speak about, a couple of the projects you worked on and then, the end result. And so you could say that, you know, unfortunately, setting OKRs and meeting OKRs due to the nature of the companies you've worked at haven't been a large focus, um, but the North Star metrics would be a good substitute to
okay,
think about,
cool.
right? And I mean, most people
Nice.
get that. They'd be like, okay, fair enough. And you would say, and
Cool.
you could also say as well that working in a company where they actually do have defined OKRs and they do have not just a North Star metric for the product company, but a North Star metrics for the entire organization, one that is actually filtered down and measured against top down would be a breath of fresh air. And that is something to
Yeah,
look forward to. And then you could turn
definitely.
around and say, can you talk to me a little bit about the OKRs that you have for this particular role or this, particular department or what it is that you're looking to accomplish, right? So
Nice.
again, going back to what we spoke about, in terms of an interview being like a two-way street, because you're speaking to directors, they want to see that in these conversations, right?
Nice.
So
Nice.
when you're speaking about the technical details and like you answer that question and then you fully answer it, you can turn around and say, okay, so does that answer your question? And also, if you don't mind me asking, how close does that match what it is that you're looking to accomplish right now at Smith RX? Was on the money? Yes.
Mm,
Okay, cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then through the questions that you ask, you can demonstrate that you understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish from a technical perspective. And they'll just be like, okay, yeah, Sam gets it straight away.
nice. Nice. Awesome. Awesome. So do that for both the technical questions and the OKR questions. Like
Yeah.
just kind of follow up and be like, hey, is this similar to what you guys are doing?
Yeah.
And if it's different, I would love to know.
Yes. 100%.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I know it seems like a lot to be able to tell a story, ask a question, we've all that. It is a lot. But I think you're more than capable of doing it. And so just to kind of give you a bit of a meta insight about how like I guess like the highest form of my coaching and how it works with people is so when I work with Jim, he said something at the end of his graduation where he basically said that the when he first started working with me, I said, "Hey, I think you're more than capable of doing this job. Like you have all of the right ingredients." And there was a part of him that kind of believed in that, but then a big part of him that didn't necessarily believe in that because he hadn't done it before. However,
Mm,
as part of all the coaching sessions that he had with me, as well as the process of interviewing for these positions and implementing a lot of the communication skills that I was teaching him, he said that by the end of it, he actually felt as if he had kind of come into that potential and was now actually ready to take on board a director role. And so,
nice.
yeah, and
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, and so I don't really speak about this on the front end because it sounds a little bit too good to be true. It's like, hey, I'm going to help you get be a better director at the same time. They're like, you haven't even
Yeah.
seen product before. What the fuck? But if it feels as if it's like a lot to implement, it is. But when you do
Yeah.
implement it, it will change the way that you communicate, the way you think about
Yeah. That's what I need.
communication, which will directly translate to job performance as well, especially in the role that you're stepping
Nice.
into.
Nice. Wow. So Jim wasn't even a product director role and he was able to get a product director role?
Yeah, he was a GPM before.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's not an easy feat,
Oh,
especially in this market.
yeah. Well, that was even with a company that said they didn't want to hire a director of product. So,
Holy shit. Nice.
and I think, I mean, you've got all of the ingredients as well, Sam, right? Like you've got
Cool.
all of you've got that je ne sais quoi, man. You just need the right education and a bit of practice, man, and we'll get you there as well.
Knock on wood, man. Thanks.
For sure. So uh, let's talk about prioritization, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this is going to show up in a number of different areas, right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
I'm just gonna like. By the way, I've just pulled up Claude finally and just asked it to give me a bunch of questions that might be helpful for us to
Cool.
practice
Hell
with.
yeah.
And I actually really like this one. So
Sure.
this is for um, okay. So how would you prioritize competing platform needs across different client segments? And also, this is kind of my own addition. Do you have any
Sure.
maybe when you've had to do that in the past? And what were the trade-offs that you were making, and why did you decide to make those trade-offs?
Yeah, 100%. Actually, I have a really good example of that. So when we were first building out our our platform, our quoting platform for NPL insurance, there was a trade-off decision that needed to be made. And that trade-off decision was, do we go with this smaller, essentially more easy lower hanging fruit to attack first, or do we go with the harder essentially the harder states to roll out to first?
Yep.
And the final decision that we made was to actually go after the harder states first for a number of reasons. There's two essentially main reasons why we decided that. One was the fact that those harder states had more configurability to them. So if we knew that we rolled out to those states first, then there was very little for us left to do on building out those APIs after we had already rolled out to those states. The other thing as well was that if you looked at it from a revenue perspective or a TAM perspective, those harder to enable states were the states that had more customers, they had a higher population, and the partners were already traditionally selling more policies in those states. So if they wanted to get ROI for both us and them as quick as possible, it was a better trade-off decision for us to go after those harder states first and take a little bit more time so that we can build a more robust platform that the first go around. And then also when we knew when we rolled out the products, that we would start selling more policies quicker instead of going after the smaller states that might have been easier to implement, but we would be getting less policies sold. So those were those two key things were essentially the trade-off decisions that we had to make is yes, we're going to get to market a little bit later. Um, but when we got to market, we were going to be able to sell higher volume of policies once we rolled out.
Mhm. Okay.
And there was less engineering time on the back end.
Yeah, and how did that play out? Like, what was the result of that?
The result was great. We were able to bind 5,000 policies a week once we rolled out in those states. Whereas comparison to some of the other states, when we rolled out to those states, we were selling maybe 500 policies a week.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, I think for prioritization, for that answer, the thing I think might have been missing was, I guess, your particular input into that situation,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
again, it just kind of comes back to we want to differentiate between we and I. Um,
Yeah.
so what was your input into that prioritization?
Yeah, so my input was essentially gathering the scope and the level of effort that it was going to be from the engineering side of what the specific waves or the states were going to look like and how much time it was going to take, and also gathering the data from the partners to understand what their target addressable market was in all of those specific states that we were rolling out to. So then at that time, what I was able to do is take that data and then put it all together and essentially look at, okay, well, it'll take us 2 to 3 weeks to roll out into, I can't remember, but let's say uh, Maine, but they only sold an average of, let's say, you know, 1,000 policies a month, but it'll take us 6 weeks to roll out in California, but they were selling, you know, 10,000, 20,000 policies a month. So
Mhm.
once that picture became very clear, then at that point it was easy for me to prioritize which states we were going to roll out first and also make that case for not only our internal stakeholders, so the CEO and the CTO, but also take it directly. The client was Intuit, so take it directly to Intuit and say, hey, Intuit, this is what we feel the rollout should be, and this is why. And then they were completely on board with that.
Mhm. Awesome. Cool. Um,
Cool.
yeah, no, great job with that. So I think that was,
Nice.
yeah, that was really well done. We've still got a bunch of time, man, but I just wanted to double check.
Sure.
You want to take a quick break or you're good to just keep going?
Let's just keep going, and then if we can end early, let's end early.
Yeah, easy. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
So, all right. So prioritization was good. I'd like to talk about uh like mentorship and leading a team.
Yeah,
I think for specifically, I think going back to OKRs, I think it's
yeah.
um the Claude raised a really good question, which was like, how would you structure OKRs for a team of senior PMs across
Mm.
different platform areas or different product functions?
Yeah, I think each product function has a specific business role that it's tied back to. So whether that product function is an internal tool or it's a consumer-facing feature or it's a partner-facing feature, there's specific impact that we want that function to have. So each of the OKRs for the PM should be tied directly to their product area. So
Yep.
for example, if we had a senior PM who was working on back end tools for our customer service team. What are the specific things that they're trying to solve? What are those pain points that they're trying to solve? Maybe it's they want to be able to field more calls with AI instead of having a human. So that would be the specific OKR that we would set is, you know, how many calls were be able to be pre-screened where the user was able to get the answer that they needed without talking to a customer service representative. Or if we're looking at consumer facing sides, PM is another great example. If you're responsible for the medication marketplace, your OKR would be driving down PM costs, and that would be the OKR that you set for that specific PM.
Gotcha. Okay. And so how would you balance setting OKRs that are reasonable but still challenging at the same time?
Yeah, I think the thing about OKRs is that you always need to set it slightly above what you think that expectation is. And
Mhm.
if you set it slightly above what that expectation is, then you know that team is going to reach for that goal. And if they don't reach it completely, you can see how far they come. The last thing you want a team to do is to say, oh, we hit that OKR. We don't need to think about any more creative ideas of how we can be able to get there. So you always want to make it slightly higher than what you expect. But the thing is it's a delicate balance. You need to make sure that a team feels empowered to reach that goal. But if they don't hit the goal, it's not going to be something where they're going to get put on a PIP or they're going to lose their job. That's just simply a goal that we think that you can hit. But if you don't hit that goal, it's okay. You go back, you're gonna have the PMs go back and run some postmortems, be able to go through and um, have some deep thought about what they can do next time around to be able to get closer to hitting those OKRs. Because most of the time, the OKRs will essentially roll over. So the quarter might not be over, but the next quarter, you're probably going to be trying to capture those same OKRs until the next annual planning meeting. So that gives them a learning opportunity to go back and say, okay, cool. We weren't able to hit this OKR. Where were we failing? Was it A, B, or C? And they can be able to refine that process a little bit more.
Great. So what about mentorship? Can you describe
Yeah.
your approach is to mentoring senior PMs?
Yeah. Senior PM specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So senior PMs, from my experience, are incredibly driven by their careers. So a senior PM is usually trying to go one of two directions. They're either trying to stay in IC and move into staff GPM level role, or they're trying to go into people management where they're trying to reach for director of product, VP of product. So
Mhm.
whenever I bring on board a senior PM or someone gets promoted to a senior PM, that's the very first question that I ask them is, what do you think you want your career trajectory to go? Do you want it to go more into an IC path or do you want to go into more of a people management path? And based on that decision that they give me, then at that point, I will find opportunities within the business for them to either do mentorship and people management type things so that they can build up that muscle, or I'll throw them into more of technical, larger scope product things so that they can be able to build up more of their IC muscle. The important thing is being able to make sure that you can balance um, what their career needs are with the needs of the business. So you have to find opportunities within the business for them to be able to do that, because
Mhm.
essentially their time is company time. So you don't want to send somebody to go read a bunch of PRDs that aren't relevant to them. But you want to find those opportunities to build out more products and features that might be a little bit more technical, that might have a little bit more scope.
Mhm.
And then within the people management realm side of things, you want to be able to find opportunities for them to be able to, coach and mentor and move into more of a people management type thing. So, did we hire on some new APMs that are still learning? Do we have some middle tier PMs that really are trying to get to that senior PM role, and then you can take them under your wing and mentor them.
So can you give me an example of when you've done this specifically? So where
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd also like to know as well
Yeah.
if you've coached a PM that was maybe struggling in a particular area, and then you coach them, and then now they're doing okay.
Yeah, 100%. So I had, well, I can answer the first question. I'll answer the first question first. So when it comes to deciding on PM track, I've had senior PMs that I've coached and mentored that have gone on the more senior IC role. So they're either staff level product managers or group product managers. And I've also had a couple of PMs who started out as senior PMs that are now directors as well. Some of them are directors within the same organization that they were a part of. Some of them actually moved on to other roles and have become directors there.
Right.
Um, when it comes to PMs that were struggling, I have one really good example of that. I had a PM who wasn't somebody that I hired on, but got moved over to my team from another team.
What, co-
And when he moved, yeah,
what company was this?
this was over at Sure. So actually, all of those examples were over at Sure because I didn't directly manage anyone at Prescriptive, but I had a really large team at Sure that at one point was 9 p.m. So I had
Yeah.
a lot of people who I was managing.
Yeah.
Um, but the PM that I had gotten at Sure that was struggling had come from another product leader. He had moved over to my team because I needed more people essentially, and he was a really good fit for the things that I was trying to do. He had some consulting experience. He had a lot of B2C experience, which was the thing that I was looking for that specific product area. But quickly after he came on board, I started getting a lot of Slack messages from people who were on his team who were saying, "Hey, seems like a really smart guy, but he doesn't talk to me." That was coming from the engineering manager.
Right.
Or the engineers were saying, "Hey, he basically sits there and designs our entire system for us
Yeah.
and then doesn't end up talking to us
Right.
and just kind of gives it to us and say, hey, you're going to build this and you're going to build it that way."
Yeah.
And it quickly became apparent that his cross collaboration skills were definitely pretty weak. So the way that I approached it was first and foremost, I didn't want him to think that his team was talking about him behind his back. So I didn't say that, hey, people have been telling me that you're doing this and you're doing that. I just started asking him questions. Look, when, he came to me with a PRD for a review, I would just ask him like, hey, have you reviewed this with the engineering manager? And his response would go, no. And I would say, that's really important. You want to be able to get her input. I think the design that you created makes sense to me, but you're going to want to get her input as well. Or if he would go and he would say, all right, cool, this thing is done. I've already reviewed it with the engineering manager. I think it's ready to put into the next sprint. I would say, have you reviewed it with the team yet? Have you gotten their responses to it? And he would say, no. I'd say, okay, let's try and go ahead and do that. Before you put it in front of the team, you don't want to surprise them with this, and B, you got a lot of really smart engineers on your team who I think are going to have a lot of really great feedback for you.
Mhm.
So that through that process of continually doing that, it built a lot of muscle. And I think also the other thing that I had realized is that he was a little scared and a little intimidated. So he had thought that it was his responsibility to go through and actually design all these things and come up with all these ideas because that was his experience in the past. He had never come from a culture that was that cross collaborative. So he just thought that was the way that he was supposed to do things. And that was able to really kind of unwrinkle those wrinkles in his approach. And he ended up becoming an incredible asset to the team and never got any, um, never got any negative feedback from him after that. It took a little while.
Yeah.
It
Was
took
there,
a bit of repetition, but
was
he was
there,
able to get there.
was there any pushback with that from
He
him?
didn't give me any pushback from it. I think the important thing was the approach is really important.
Yeah.
You don't want any Yeah, you don't want anyone to feel like they're cornered or they have people that are talking about them behind their backs. It just simply started out with questions and suggestions and feedback in that way instead of being like, hey, your engineering manager says she hasn't talked to you and your team is saying that you're bringing PRDs to them that you never reviewed with them and expecting them to build it. So it was because of that approach I was able to not really get any feedback for that because I was just making simple suggestions to him. I knew that he was a smart enough and mature enough person where if I were to make suggestions to him in that way, then he would run with it.
Great. So this kind of leads into the next thing I was talking about, which is you've given me a great example. I'm wondering if you have any other examples of influence without authority, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you go about influencing stakeholders, for example, or, critical people who are part of projects when maybe you don't have the direct authority to, command them to do something.
Yeah, 100%. I did this with stakeholders a lot, especially when building out very technical internal platforms for internal stakeholders who maybe weren't very technical. So a lot of the times what ended up happening is they would come to you and say, "Hey, we need a teleportation device." And you would go, "That's crazy. Nobody has a teleportation device." But the thing that you really need to understand is what that critical pain point is and what they're really trying to accomplish in order to make a more elegant suggestion to them that was still going to achieve their goals, but was more realistic for the cost and capacity and the effort that we really had. So for teleportation, they'll ask you, you start asking them, okay, like, well, what are you trying to do? Like, oh, well, there's this island and there's this big body of water in between the island, and we got to get to that other big body of water and we got to do it fast. And you're like, okay, well, you got to get across a big body of water fast. That sounds like you need something more like a boat. Okay, how fast are you trying to get across that big body of water? Um, you know, we got to get across it in,
Mhm.
at least 20 to 30 miles per hour. Like, okay, well, it sounds like you might need more of a speedboat. Take it back to the engineering team and you say, okay, well, they need to get across this big body of water. It sounds like they might need a speedboat. Do you guys have any other suggestions? And they'll go, oh, well, there's these sailing boats that we could probably build that will fit the amount of people that they need, and we'll actually be able to get there pretty fast, and we won't need to go deal with the complexity of having to build an engine. You go, yeah, okay, great. How long is that going to take? What's the estimate? How long is it going to, what's going to be the cost? Is there any extra infrastructure that we need to build to be able to build out these super fast sailboats? You'll gather all that information. Then you go back to those internal stakeholders and say, hey, I know you guys are really, really excited about a teleportation device, but I think we might have come up with a better solution that'll actually be able to get you guys across that body of water from one island to another much quicker. Here's this super fast sailboat. Oh, also, by the way, it's going to save us this much money. We'll be able to get it done this much faster,
Mhm.
and it'll fulfill everything that you need. And then you always kind of add in the but later on we could iterate to the point where we can get to a teleportation device once that type of technology becomes available. And that's kind of the best way to be able to influence stakeholders, is being able to really understand what the problem is by asking the why question a million times, and then being able to come up with an elegant solution that's going to solve that problem that you identified from asking the why question, and then being able to come back to them with a solution instead of just saying no. Because product managers, like, they kind of drill it into you all the time, like, you got to say no, you got to say no, you got to say no. And realistically that doesn't work, especially if you're talking to somebody who's
Mhm.
your CPO or the CEO or the CEO of a partner company that has no tech background.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, no, sorry, we can't do that. You really need to understand what that problem is and be able to come to them with an elegant solution, because they're not going to take no for an answer.
Mhm. Cool. So I really like that answer. By the way, so I know I've given you like rapid fire questions for like the last like.
Yeah, it's all good. This is great.
No, you're doing awesome, man.
Thanks, man.
The reason why I didn't stop is because everything was great. So on that last one, there's kind of a second layer to that, right? Which
Okay.
is like not just the functional approach of how do I present an elegant solution to the problem that somebody is presenting to me, right? There is another layer of, okay, who is the person that I'm speaking to? What are their priorities? Or
Mm,
what are their emotions, right? That I'm dealing with,
yeah.
right? And the reason why this is so important, especially once you start to become a director, is because let's say, for example, somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, we need a teleportation device because we really need to fix this problem," right? Okay, great. If you operate under the premise and the assumption that that is the be all and end all, and that is the solution that you need to fix, and we just need to figure out other ways and to figure out that solution. That's fine. But what if the reason that they said that we need a teleportation device is based on the wrong idea, right? Let's say, for example,
Yeah.
with a lot of
Yeah.
pressure and it was a snap decision and it's something that's just going to spend a lot of time, like waste a lot of your time trying to come up with a solution, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's a pretty average analogy, but I guess what I'm trying to say is um, when you're telling these stories, right, it's important to speak about the human to human elements of what it is that you,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
and this is something actually I worked with Jim on, which was let's say you're speaking about a particular situation where you deal with a stakeholder, right? If you only
Okay.
think about it in the sense of the problem, you don't give them an insight into your understanding of your EQ, right? So if you just
Mm,
stick to this is the problem and this is kind of how we solve it,
gotcha.
right? They don't know, they can't see you solving people problems, right? They see you solving functional and technical problems. But like,
I
okay,
gotcha.
how does Sam like solve people problems, right? And so we need to give them that.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, you might say, something along the lines of, okay, so I had this one CEO, external CEO who I was dealing with, who was really hell bent on a particular solution in one direction, right? And then instead of you explaining functionally why that solution was incorrect and how you managed to get them around, you could spend a little bit of time at the start of that story to talk about your perspective and your understanding as to why he thought that
Mm,
was the correct solution, right? So
yeah.
and that shows that you are able to put yourself into the other person's shoes, um,
Yeah.
which
That's really great feedback.
yeah, which shows a lot, which shows a lot more. It shows you understand the different layers and dynamics at play beyond just like again just solving problems, right? Because once you get into leadership,
Yeah.
you're not just solving functional problems, you're also leading people, which leads to conflict and which leads to issues of perception and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's when that next layer comes in, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. That's really good feedback.
So
That's great.
as I was saying that, what was the example that came to mind that you were thinking of?
Yeah, the example that well, I was still running on the analogy of the teleportation device.
Yeah.
But an example that I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Um,
Let's make it easy then. So the guy that you
yeah,
who was like a consultant, right? You touched on it
yeah,
a bit in terms of yeah, he was he can say came from a consulting background. That's kind of how he did it.
yeah.
He was a little bit nervous. But you kind of skimmed a little bit over that. So why don't we just elaborate a little bit more on like why you thought he approached things the way he did?
Mm.
And what his emotions were when he was dealing with like that situation.
Yeah, 100%. So knowing that he came from a consulting background, consultants are usually the ones who are responsible for coming up with everything. There's not a lot of cross collaboration that happens within consulting. It's you go in, you understand the business problem, you put together a solution to that business problem, and you hand it over to the client. And knowing this, I gave me a good understanding or a good sense of where he was coming from because typically working in consulting, you're not cross collaborating with engineering managers. You don't have an engineering team that's coming to you. So I knew that that was the reason why he was taking that approach, is because that's the way that he had been trained. So I didn't fault him for it. I just knew that this was a new way of working that he needed to be able to start implementing. It wasn't that he was a bad product manager or that he was incapable of doing the role. It's just he was so used to doing it one way and I never even thought about doing it the other way. And that's why I didn't want to approach him in a way where, he thought he was doing a bad job because in his mind he wasn't, because this is the way that he had always done it. But making him start learning how he can do it another way and how that other way is actually much better than the way that he was doing it uh, in when you're doing it at a consulting firm.
Great.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, cool. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So, um, so that part is really good for like mentorship, setting guidelines. Tell me about a time when you dealt with a difficult stakeholder.
Yeah,
When have you gotten told no, and had to kind of like deal with it, right?
yeah,
Well, like that framework of that understanding is applicable to all of those types of examples. Um,
gotcha.
and yeah, like it's super
Nice.
super powerful.
That's awesome feedback. Yeah,
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Let's talk about UX because we've got
sure.
10 minutes left. All right. Uh, so, I mean, I don't have anything after, by the way, so we can run a little bit
Cool,
over
cool.
our respective time. Um, so UX, let's just start super easy, right? So how do
Yeah,
you approach, like walk me through your process for collaborating with design teams on complex workflow optimization? And also, do you have an example specifically uh,
yeah.
that would be relevant to Smith RX? That would be the best example to give.
Yeah, 100%. So, working in both the insurance and the health tech space, all of your user interactions or your user experience is usually pretty complex because there's a layer of regulation that comes with it. So you can only surface specific types of data. You can only guide people certain directions. So that is always something that you always want to make sure that is clear to the UX designers before they even start. The other thing that's incredibly important for UX design is the path of the experience, or essentially the workflow of the experience. So, one thing that I love doing, and a tool that I always use for every single one of my products and features, and something that I always train and coach all of my PMs to do, is to be able to actually use workflows in a way that not only explain the back end data flow processes, but also the user experience processes. Because simply writing out user stories or giving a PRD to a design team doesn't help them understand what needs to happen at what point and what those specific trade-offs or essentially forks in that experience will be. So you always want to create something where it starts at the start. You'll go through every possible fork of that experience and then what that end state is going to be for both happy path and unhappy path. And that gives the user, the UX team, the kind of visualization that they need because they're UX designers, they're mostly visual people. They don't want to sit there and read a 50-page PRD, but that gives them the context and the understanding of this is the workflow that we have to layer our user experience on top of. But you also want to make sure that those guidelines and guardrails that are very specific to the types of experiences that you're building. So your HIPAA experience or any other regulatory thing, you want to make sure that those guardrails are clear. So you want to not only put them in a PRD, but you also want to be able to put them within the actual document of the workflow that you're giving them as well. A perfect example of this was building out the very first version of the adjudication platform. Adjudication is something that is incredibly complicated. There are many, many different forks and many different outcomes that a user can go down until they get to a final decision of whether something is approved or something is denied or something needs more. Um, or something needs to have a needs to be reviewed by an actual human being. So the way that we structured it is we took that very first specific product and we actually build out multiple workflows for all the different forks. And we used Figma because Figma allowed us to actually embed workflows within another workflow. So the UX designer can go through and see, oh, okay, someone wants to make a claim for an item that was broken that they bought with their credit card. Okay, where do they start? They start here. Then at this point, they put in when it happened. Did it happen within a specific time range? Is there a time range that is required? Oh yeah, there is. What happens if it's within that time range? What happens if it's not within that time range? And you make those guardrails very clear. So not only do they understand this is these are the kind of different paths that we need to design for, but these are also the guardrails that we need to account for. And then that way it makes their job much easier when it comes to building out those experiences. So in the very first pass, they're able to get much closer to what that final end state is going to be, than them essentially having to guess it. Because most of the time, they're not going to want to read a PRD, and PRDs have a tendency to be also a little bit more technical as well. So you want to be able to create those artifacts that are for them, that are made specifically for them in order to make their lives easier.
Great. Dude, fucking fantastic answer, by the way.
Nice,
Um,
nice, nice.
really good. Uh,
Thanks, man.
how do you incorporate user research and feedback into your like platform decisions?
Yeah, user research and feedback is incredibly important. I think you should always be getting user feedback and research. The thing is you have to understand what mechanisms are available to you. So, with prescriptive being in healthcare, a lot of times you can't reach out to patients. You can't say, "Hey, I found out that you're taking Vicodin for your pain. How's your Vicodin going?" But you can be able to collect feedback in different ways. You can be able to do things like CSAT scores and bubble up CSAT scores. You can actually talk to providers and pharmacists and be able to get their feedback as well, which is something that we did at Prescriptive all the time. Another thing that I did when I was at Prescriptive is I actually manned the phone lines, and talked to customers that were calling in to our customer support line. And most of the time they were complaining. But what that did is not only did it surface bugs that we had not known about and experiences that we had not known about, but I can see what people were actually trying to use the platform for, what their pain points actually were, and how we could get better to be able to take that data and take that information back to the team to help us make better informed decisions in the way that we prioritize our features and our bugs as well.
Great. Okay. So do you have a specific example of like a UX change that you helped contribute to that resulted in like a more positive user conversion or user experience, for example?
Yeah, 100%. So when we were building out our PA flow, we initially had our PA flow be a step-based process.
Where was this? What company?
Oh, sorry. This was that prescriptive. We had built out a prior authorization flow, and we got a lot of calls about prior authorization into our customer support line. And the one thing I noticed was the most of the time when I was getting calls about prior authorizations, it was simply, what's the status of my prior authorization? And the thing that I came to realize is that when when we were showing the status of the prior authorization, we were showing way too many steps. It was, hey, we received the medication that requires a prior authorization. Hey, we reached out to your doctor to get the update on the prior authorization. Oh, the prior authorization is in the middle of being processed. Oh, it's been reviewed. Oh, it got sent to the pharmacy. That was way too many steps. What they simply wanted to know was, where is my prior auth and when am I going to get my medication? And that when am I going to get my medication was the most important data piece that they needed. So at that point, we realized that within that prior authorization flow, and that step sequencer, it was like kind of like the Domino's pizza tracker. If you're familiar with it, like the Domino's pizza tracker will show you you're going to get your pizza at 9:05. We didn't do that. So what was really important for us was be able to just add that simple piece of data to say, hey, we got your prior authorization. You're going to be able to pick up your medication in the next 2 to 3 days. And that really dramatically reduced the call volume for prior authorization, probably cut it in half because half of the people that were calling, that's all they wanted to know is, when am I going to be able to get my medication? I don't care if my doctor is reviewing it. I don't care if the pharmacist is reviewing it. When am I going to be able to get my meds because I need my meds?
Yeah. Awesome, man. Um,
Cool.
I'm just having a look through to see if there's much else we need to think about for UX. You kind of already spoke about like some of the US considerations, like surfacing specific data, more user friendly design. Okay, honestly, man, I'm pretty confident in the UX side of things based on your answers. How are you? How do you feel?
Feel good. I haven't talked about these things in a while. It's been a while since I've all the interviews I've had recently have been either like hiring manager interviews or recruiter screens. So like kind of remembering all this stuff and talking about it again makes me feel way better because
Yeah,
that was one thing that I was nervous about that I was like, shit, I haven't talked about this stuff in so long. Like the prescriptive stuff I can talk about, but the sure stuff it had been forever.
yeah, 100%. And so just a bit of feedback for you.
Yeah.
Like specifically, so I really like the way that you're able to communicate off the cuff, right? So
Cool.
I can give you, I know that we could sit here and I can give you 50 more questions and you'll be able to articulate eloquently about your experience, about this particular area, and so on and so forth. And so the bits where I've kind of stopped you or given you input or feedback, these are just tiny tweaks to give it a little bit more structure, as well as a little bit more focus on certain areas that are going to make it
Mm,
easier for these people to conceptually understand your background and then also see how you would apply it in that
nice.
role, right? And the way that they carry.
Totally makes sense.
So the
That's
UX
great feedback.
leader wants to know that you understand workflows and you understand UX designers, and you obviously do based on the explanation you gave. The guy who looks after like platform execution, for example, is probably going to want to we're going to want to make sure that you understand how like the specifics of the industry that you're working in a very technical detail. And if you could also help with the growth of the adjudication system, and you
Yeah.
think about that, then that and in a way that makes him comfortable, that you'd be able to help him, that's going to give him a lot of that's going to give him a lot of comfort, right? So
Nice.
all of the answers that you gave me, if I were them, I'm not them, obviously, but all the answers that you gave me, I would give you like an A plus, man. Like
Nice. Hell yeah. Thanks, man.
really good job. Yeah.
Dude,
Um,
that's awesome to hear.
yeah,
Thank you, man.
very welcome.
Hell yeah.
Any feedback for me, by the way, on the coaching session?
No, I think this was great. Um, yeah, man. I think like I really appreciated you just rapid firing questions at me. Um, because it kind of just put me back in the seat, which is a seat that I hadn't been in a while. And now I feel a lot more comfortable knowing that like, okay, cool. I just talked to Alex and he threw a bunch of like curveball questions at me and it made me think about things that I hadn't thought about a lot. And also give me feedback on those things. So I really love that. I didn't have the nerves of the interview because I know you, but also at the same time, like it definitely helps my confidence because like interviews are nerve-wracking, man. So anytime you're about to jump in, you're like, oh shit, your mind's racing a million miles an hour. You start thinking about things, and all of a sudden, like you kind of like you forget about things, or you like so yeah, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just like forget words, and I'm like, oh shit, what's that word? Oh yeah, my name is
Yeah.
Sam.
I
So
mean,
I think doing
that's what
uh,
the practice sessions are for, right? Is so that
exactly,
brain to mouth connection kicks in, and then you're like, oh, I'm back.
yeah,
And then you're like, oh,
yes.
yeah, I feel confident.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was really, really great. I also love the fact that you actually like reviewed the JD and looked at, okay, well, this is what they're looking for in this role. These are the type of people that we're going to be talking to. And I really like that you also broke down um, what I'm going to be talking to these people about, because that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. Like, yeah, the PBM guy is going to want to talk probably more about like platform strategy of things, and the engineering guy is probably going to want to talk about the more technical stuff, like the data stuff, and the designer is going to want to talk about design things. They probably have a bunch of design questions for me. So usually I kind of go into these like, all right, what are we gonna hit next?
Yeah, and you keep
Um,
and then you get to the end and you're exhausted and it's
yes,
yeah, cool.
exactly.
Um, Sweet. So what would you say were your biggest takeaways from our session?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from our session was be kind of reminding me about the car method, and kind of thinking of that because the way that I'd only been doing it with the hiring manager screens, but to continue doing it with all of the other screens as well. And also, the other big takeaway that I had is this is a director level role. And so this is a people management role. And so this is going to be something that I have to show to them is my EQ. So being able to, where the opportunity goes, whether it's talking about like kind of coaching or even like some of those like stakeholder management questions, making sure I'm thinking about the EQ level and how I connected with that person, instead of just going into like a solution. Hey, this is how I figured out this problem, because that's more of like a GPM, senior PM type of thing. I want to be also making sure I incorporate how I work with people and how I work with various stakeholders, whether they're people that report to me or the CEO of the company.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So I'm going to send you the recording. I would highly
Cool.
recommend listening back to it, not just for my,
Yeah.
but also to listen to your own voice speak about some stuff.
Yes.
It's not obviously you've filmed some Loom videos, so you probably got used to listening to
Yes.
your own voice now. So you kind of got no
Yeah.
hopefully a hurdle
Seeing
with
myself on camera.
yeah, seeing hearing yourself on camera. But it's more
Yeah.
about just listening to the like the verbiage of the stuff, and it's kind
Okay.
of just reminding yourself of those like little touch points in those
Yeah.
stories. It just makes it a lot easier
Cool.
to remember. It's super passive. You can put it on the background at like 1.5 times
Cool.
and yeah, you'll get a ton of juice out of it. The one
Nice.
last thing that I wanted to speak about was
Yeah.
the specifically converting it from a GPM to a director role, right? So
Okay.
when so again, I spoke about the questions and keep making that a two-way street. So when you see those opportunities,
Yeah.
those questions.
Yes.
The other thing is at some point there's going to be a conversation with a VP or someone or a recruiter where they want to, or it might even be in these interviews where they might like ask you some questions around like your candidacy for a director, right? So the
Okay.
might be some stuff along the lines of okay, if you were to come in here, how would you design a roadmap for, the first like 90 days to the first 6 months, given these
Mm,
problems that we're speaking about, in conjunction with these other prioritizations that we have going on right now, right?
yeah.
So a question like that would be one where they would evaluate your candidacy to be a director,
Gotcha.
correctly in that question, right?
Cool.
And the other ones is kind of like auxiliary, like they'll hear it and they'll kind of see it with like all the bits you're weaving in, but there'll be some questions that might be like very focused on, okay, does this person think
Mm,
like a director, right?
yeah.
So the advice that I have is if you do get any questions that are like that, what you want to do is you want to, it's okay to pause, right? These might be short interviews, but it's okay to pause and take a second to think about it. But what I want you to really try and communicate is if you're speaking about anything that is strategy related and vision related, that has like a big follow-on effect, which is pretty much almost everything we've spoken about. What a lot of people don't do is they don't speak about the second and third order consequences of the project that you're working on, right? And so that is essentially the difference between a GPM versus a director is obviously you've got people management, but the other side of it is your job is to look after an entire division of a business. And depending
Mm,
on the company, you might be the director of product, right? And just have the VP and that's
right.
so you have to look at all of these projects that your, VP or your CPO has given you and go, okay, from a business perspective, what projects do we need to focus on and why, right? And then
Yeah.
what are the second and third order consequences of us reaching this goal and solving and, finishing this project, and what's the follow-on effect, right? So now that we were actually able to roll out this particular solution to 50 states, right, in 1 year, right? That's the first level, right? That's the first level. We completed the project, right? But what's the second and third order consequence of that? meaning that now
Mm,
we've actually rolled out this solution to the 50 states. Well, what that means for us from a business perspective is now we can allocate resources in different areas. Our revenue has now tripled, right? From a competitive perspective, like us versus like all the other online prescription services in the market, we now have a particular advantage that allows us to do X, Y, Z, or so on and so
mm,
forth, right? So
yeah.
those details are details that you should add or sprinkle into a lot of your stories. It's a pretty much as
Okay. Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you told me that before, but I completely forgot about it. That's great feedback.
Yeah. Um,
Nice.
so the only other one that I can think of is when a so if you want to turn this GPM role into a director role, you have to be very focused and try to make that happen, right? So let's say, for
Okay.
example, if a if they start asking questions about like why do you want to work at this company and so on and so forth, your narrative needs to match up with and align with that direction. You could say, well,
Mm,
the reason why you've left the company and just say, look, at this stage of my career, like I've been a director before, given this scope and the responsibility that I was taking on at my previous company, even though I wasn't really a director in title, it was pretty much the same level of responsibility. So at this stage, I would be looking for a director role, and this is what I'm looking for: X, Y, and Z. Right? A company
yeah.
that does care about OKRs to the extent that it's not something that leadership would just speak about. A company that's really collaborative, a company that you know will you know um, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
No, it's all good. No, I get what you're saying though. Yeah, like not only is it going to kind of give me the scope that I'm looking for, but also a company that, values feedback from the customers, is thinking about growth, is definitely making a positive impact on people's health outcomes, and is working in, a collaborative environment where people are not siloed, especially the product team.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Nice.
the because this might come up in terms of like leadership or strategy or anything like that. You one thing that one thing that you might want to weave in is, I guess, your general philosophy about how you like to manage teams and
Mm,
culture, right? So that's actually a question that we didn't
okay.
really touch on. Do you have time, by the way, or do you have to run?
I do. I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, hold on. Let me see when this interview is. Uh it's not until 3:30, so I'm good. I got time.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll just do this one last question, and we'll wrap it
Cool.
up. So yeah, so how do you like try and create a culture of collaboration or a culture of performance, right? How do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, a culture of collaboration and a culture of performance all comes down to the way that you not only structure the teams, but you also empower your teams to do things. So, if you are constantly, um, micromanaging your employees or doing their work for them, not only are they probably not most likely not going to be happy about that, but you give them very little opportunity to be able to take their work and collaborate with UX designers or UI designers or engineers, because they're not the ones who are building out those things. They're not the ones who are coming up with those solutions. So it makes it difficult for them to even have the context because they're like, oh, well, Sam did it all for me. So in those senses, they're usually not going to go to the engineering team and be like, hey, Sam came up with this thing. What do you think? They're going to be the ones who are going to come up with the solutions. They're going to be the ones who are going to design these things, or, not from a UX design perspective, but more in a feature design perspective. And then they're going to be the ones who are going to be going out and collaborating with the engineering team or collaborating with the design team. Obviously, as a as a people leader, and a coach yourself, you need to help provide guidance with them as well. So you want to make sure that you're constantly checking in, seeing if they're blocked, they need anywhere to be unblocked, or they just simply want your feedback for anything. But you have to avoid doing their work for them. And then if you avoid doing their work for them, that will allow them to collaborate. And sometimes if you don't see they're collaborating, then you kind of have to do essentially what I did with one of my old reports, where you need to ask those questions and you need to say, hey, did you review this with the design team? Did you review this with the engineering manager? Did you review this with the engineering team? When they're coming to you and they're telling you that something is done. So you need to be able to essentially have them build that muscle. Sometimes product managers have a tendency to be a little intimidated by engineers or engineering managers or designers. It can be scary. They might think that they're going to sound dumb. But that's never the case. 100% of the time, the engineers want to work with the product managers, and 100% of the time, the engineers want to know what the product managers are working on, and they'd love to give feedback. So that's essentially the muscle that you have to build. I can't remember the first part of your question. What was the first part? We talked about collaboration, and then what was the other one?
Collaboration. I guess like a culture of collaboration. The other thing was
Okay.
culture of like high performance, I guess.
Yeah. A culture of high performance is all about setting clear goals and expectations. You need to make sure that everyone understands what they're doing, but also why they're doing those things and what the impact is going to have. If you're just telling product managers to build products because it's something that somebody wants or a client is demanding it, there's not a lot of motivation behind that. But if you make sure that product managers understand, hey, if we build out this thing and then that thing is going to unlock this and then that is going to unlock this, where we're going to be able to grow into an even bigger company and be able to get more money in our next round or go public or whatever it might be. Those are the things that motivate product managers because they want to know what the impact is and they want to know the why.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're going to ask about it, but if they're not asking about it, then you need to make sure that that's very clear.
Mhm.
Whether it be an internal tool that's going to be something that is, helping one of our internal teams, or something that is going to be customer focusing or partner focusing, they need to understand what that impact is going to be so that they can drive towards that impact. Because if they're going to hear, okay, well, if we get this product out to market, in 6 months we can be able to package it and sell it to a bunch of other partners, that's going to help us get, $1 billion in funding in our next round or increase our valuation. That is something that they're going to want to work towards. So you want to make sure that that
Mhm.
curtain is always lifted and they make sure that they understand why the things that they're working on are so important and
Mhm.
set clear goals for them.
I like that. I really like that.
Cool.
Yeah. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, I think dropping a few of those in there in terms of like if there's any questions around like coaching or leadership or vision or anything like that, you should be dropping little bits and pieces of those in there along the way
Nice.
as
Nice.
you're thinking about those projects. Again, because where you want to think about it like you're kind of like planting the seeds of the idea, right?
Mm,
So this is
yeah.
when we talk about a lot of different projects, we talk about the second and the third order consequence. This is also why we talk about, this is also why we add in those different types of things. And this is also why we talk about, the size of the teams we've led and so on and so forth. All of this, as you're answering questions, will slowly paint a picture of you as a candidate. And the
Nice.
clearer that picture is that you're a director already, the easier it is for them to go, okay, we can see how Sam could be a great asset as a leader in our company. Obviously, you could do the GPM position, but they need to be able to see clearly how it would make sense to put you as a director, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
100%. Nice.
like we'd love to offer you a GPM position. You'd be like,
Yeah. And that's like my biggest fear. I'm like, oh God, I did all this for the role I didn't want.
even if they come back and they say, hey, we want to give you a GPM, we can still push back and we can still
Yeah,
negotiate.
that's true.
Um, so again, like with Jim, like there was like 5 times we had to push back until it
Okay.
was. So it's not over until it's over. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that even if at the end of the day, if they say no, right? Like we don't want a GPM, we don't want a director, right? We can't afford you or for whatever reason, that's okay because we also have
Yeah.
other opportunities in the pipeline. And
100%.
all of this practice of presenting and speaking about your background and experience, especially with the like the type of frameworks and thinking that we've been speaking about, like I've said, will actually make you better when you actually get into your next job, and will also make you
Yeah,
subsequent interviews. So none of it's wasted time.
100%.
It's all
Nice.
compounding interest.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I got to remember that.
I know, man. Interviewing's tough, right? It's
Yeah, man. Oh God.
but dude, you're great at it,
Thanks, man.
building up a pipeline, you're got a great background, and yeah, man, I'm excited to see where this goes. I've got a really good feeling about this.
Me too, man. Me too. Knock on wood.
Cool. All right, man.
Go, man.
I'll send you the recording. Any other questions? Or
Nice.
I feel like you're all good.
Nah, I feel like I'm all good. I'm also kind of brain dead at this point too. So
All right, man. Well, I'll leave you to it then. Let me know how the other interview goes, and
yeah.
yeah, don't forget to light up the Wins channel when you get a chance.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. For sure, man.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks,
All right,
man.
cool. Appreciate you, Alex. Thanks, man. Talk soon. Bye.